All right. Okay. Well, we have a ton of stuff to do today. So we're actually going to go ahead and get started. And then as our presenters are starting, then I can get everybody else where they need to be. All right. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our final episode of the Cute Syndrome Foundation's third annual Meaningful Change series. My name is Casey Craig, and I am the Executive Director for TCSF and Stella's mom. Today, we will hear from 4 SCN8A moms and myself as we share our tricks and tips on how we've traveled with our SCN8A children in various ways, by car, plane, boats, and even trolleys. I am thrilled to have with us our special guest presenter, Marie Trottier with TSA Cares, to talk about their program towards the end of today. And they're going to provide us tips on how we can best utilize them when traveling. We'll also have an option for you guys to ask her questions. So I'm really excited to have her on today later. All right, we have a lot to go over, so let's go ahead and get started. Ladies, if you want to go ahead and make your way to the screen as I bring up our presentation, that would be awesome. All right. So let me bring this up. Ta-da! Can you guys see that okay? Yay, something's working right today. All right, so today we're going to talk about how do you do it? Traveling tips and tricks from SCN8A caregivers. And one thing I really wanted to hit on for this presentation is that I know I did not have the confidence to travel with Stella until I saw other families doing it. And when I saw families like mine out there taking their kid to the beach in different places, I thought, you know what, maybe I can do that too. So today we're going to talk about how various parents with different, kids with different levels of SCN8A on the spectrum, right? So we're going to talk about all the different types of SCN8A spectrum kids and how we have traveled with them. So we'll have Colleen Johnston, Madison Wingham, myself, we'll have the TSA Care here in just a few minutes, Marie Trottier, and then we have Gail, and then we also have Heather. All right, so moving forward, I wanted to touch base a little bit before we got started on how we're kind of bringing this in with the from surviving to thriving theme of ours as we've gone through this Meaningful Change series today. And so one of the things that I think we need to think about is that why would we consider traveling with our SCN8A family member? We're already exhausted. So why would we put ourselves through this, right? Well, honestly, it's going to help reduce isolation that can lead to depression, anxiety, and mental health issues if we just merely stay home all day long and continue with the grind every day. So being able to get out with our children can help reduce some of that isolation. It's going to provide life experiences for our entire family, the siblings, moms, dads, grandparents, if you bring them, really kind of enriching our lives, right? And then also I kind of went back to our presentation with Kara Reiska, and she really pressed upon us to create an opportunity to cultivate joy through intentional play with our children. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to take those small moments to really have that intentional play. It also allows us to take a little bit of the caregiving role break, right? So I know everyone's like, are you kidding me? I still have to be a caregiver the entire time. And I 100% agree, but maybe we can find small bits and pieces where we can be just a parent and not a caregiver. It also creates an opportunity to participate in different clinical trials that you have to travel for, or if you are just needing to travel to get to better care. I know we have to travel about 4.5 hours to get to our children's hospital that we feel Stella gets the best care at. So it gives you kind of a little bit more autonomy and opportunities to kind of get your different care for your children. And lastly, I really like this. And this is what kind of the whole presentation is going to be here. Let's identify areas you don't feel empowered and use tools to shift out of the disempowered place. And again, our friend Kara Reiska mentioned that in her presentation a couple of weeks ago. So as we get started, I'm going to start over with Heather. All right, so Heather Crowley, I'm going to have you get started and talk about where you've traveled with Tate. I know some of it's been day trips, some of them have been longer trips. and talk about your modes of transportation and then maybe some tips and tricks for us.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know me, I'm Heather Crowley. I am Tate's mom, and he is almost 4 years old. And Tate has a lot of medical needs. He's one of the more severe kids in the group. Before Tate, our family was very active and we did a lot. And so when he came into our life, it was really kind of a major life change for us, not only caring for his medical needs, but just a shift in like what we did in our day to day. So being outside and traveling and doing fun things as a family has always been really important to us. So it was really important to me to figure out how to do that. We started out small. First of all, we are like Casey, where we have to travel 4 hours to get to our children's hospital. So that was kind of the first thing that started, is we had to do that. So I had to figure out how to at least make 4 hour trips work. That turned into how, if you're at a 4 hour trip and then doctor's appointments, then you're going to be gone all day long. So that made me realize I could do day trips. We started out with going to the zoo, going to aquariums, theme parks. We go to the lake a lot. We're a big lake family. And after we kind of mastered the day trips, that's when we got into a little bit longer trips and thinking, okay, well, if Tate can travel 4 hours round trip, that's 8 hours. So he could at least be in a car 8 hours. So just thinking about that stuff. And that's how we kind of built up to where we got to go on like family vacations. We have been to Northwest Arkansas, which isn't that far from us, honestly. We've been to Tennessee twice, and then we also took a trip to the beach last year. Casey, is everything working? I'm not seeing okay, just making sure. So what I wanted to talk to you about first is planning for the worst and hoping for the best. With your SCN8A child, you have to be very flexible. So I wanted to share really quickly a few times that things didn't work out. Because in this life, you're most likely going to have a trip or something that it just does not work out. So during our very first like family vacation, we kept it local and we just went to the lake, which is like 20-30 minutes from where we live. Tate ended up getting a nasty virus and we had to call the ambulance and have them come get us. We ended up spending 2 or 3 days in the ICU for that virus. And it was kind of gut wrenching. That was our first vacation that I had planned and it just didn't work out. But Tate was going to also get that virus. We weren't around anybody new. Tate was also going to get that virus, whether we were at home or whether we were at the lake. And so calling an ambulance and just having them pick us up at a different location sucked, but it wasn't really the end of the world. It wasn't any further to the hospital. And so even though it did kind of ruin our family vacation for that week, it was still okay because it was going to happen regardless of where we were. Also, actually, I wanted to mention that upon discharge, the rest of my family was still at the lake trying to get through and enjoy vacation. So I actually drove Tate back to the lake upon discharge because if he's going to recuperate somewhere, I might as well sit on the deck and drink coffee while looking at the lake while he's doing that, because he doesn't really care whether he lays in a bed at home or at the cabin. So that was something that happened. And yes, it wasn't great, but it was fine. We've also had different situations where we've been camping and we've had equipment break. And so instead of being at home and having our DME company just bring us a exchange of equipment at home, I just told them where we were. We were about 30-45 minutes from our house. And so they just drove to our campground, dropped off our equipment there and drove back. So I think that we kind of get into a freak out mode when something happens, but really there's usually a pretty, I don't know, it's usually not quite as big a deal as sometimes our mind makes it. We're at the lake, something's broken. Well, they can fix it at the lake just as easily as they can fix it at home. Something I've talked about our DME company with is they have contacts all across the nation. So if you have something break, they can usually get in touch with someone to help you with that too, which is something that I didn't really realize before I started asking these traveling questions. And then if anybody saw us in Nashville last year when we came for the SCN8A conference, we actually had a really bad near-death experience on our way to Nashville. Tate has a trach. His trach got clogged. He quit breathing in the back of the car, and I had to pull over on the side of the road and resuscitate him. He had a little bit of a virus that I wasn't aware of when I left for the trip. And that again would have probably happened at home. Yes, it was not a great circumstance. It was not fun doing CPR on the side of the road, and it was really scary. But I had researched all the hospitals on the way. I knew the closest one at that time was Vanderbilt. We called 911. Their response time was excellent. Once I figured out what was going on with Tate, we actually didn't end up going to the hospital, but I just felt a sense of peace knowing that I'd already checked out like what hospital I wanted to go to if something were to happen, because I'd done my research ahead of time. So a lot of times, if you think through worst case scenario before it happens, it's not quite as shocking and gut wrenching when it does. And I do tell you about these 3 terrible times I had, but those are 3 terrible times out of the hundreds of trips and day trips and things that we've done. So we've had a lot more good experiences than bad. And whenever you're in this life and your kids have medical problems, it's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies, but you have to just kind of learn to be flexible. I don't want to take up too much time, but another piece of advice I have is to, if you are an outdoor camping family, go ahead and buy a camper if you're financially able to. That was one of the first things we did to have family time and enjoy like vacation type setting with Tate. I love it because I can pack the camper once for the summer. I'm getting ready to do that here in a couple of weeks. I will go out, and instead of just packing for the weekend, I actually pack for like 4, 5, 6 different weekends. And we use our bedroom storage as Tate storage. And so there's certain things that you can't take ahead of time. Like I can't put his formula and stuff like that out in a hot camper and just let it set. But a lot of like just your plastic type medical supplies, they're all fine out there. So I pack all that stuff. And then when it does come up to the weekend of we're going somewhere, I get to pack more like a normal mom. I get to grab the food that we need. I get to grab our clothes. I have a list that I've made of Tate's last minute medical supplies that I can't pack ahead of time. And it just takes a lot of stress out of like weekend trips when you're able to prep stuff in advance. Also, it's kind of a safe space and a comfortable space for Tate. So even though we're at a different location, he's used to our camper. He's comfortable in the camper. He can stay in the air conditioning if he's not doing well. And so it's just been a really good experience for our family. And so if you have any questions about campers or how we do that, I would be more than happy to answer questions. And then also, like I talked
Heather,
about,
I'm gonna jump in real quickly. I just wanted to
yeah,
let everyone else know too. First of all, I guess the chat has been disabled for somewhat reason. It's just adding to our technical difficulties today, but we have the Q&A. So feel free to jump in and list on the Q&A, and then I will make sure to address that. I know Karen actually mentioned that they travel with Lily with a camper a lot, and they just upgraded to a Class A drivable one, and they can actually tow their handicap van behind it. And she said that that is really helpful for them as well.
yeah, that is really helpful. So we have a pull behind camper right now, but for one of our vacations when we went to Tennessee, my grandparents actually rented us a mobile home or a motor home, just kind of like Karen's talking about. And it was really great for travel too. Because Tate could kind of relax on the trip. I could do diaper changes and all of that within the motorhome, and we didn't have to get him out gas stations and things like that. And he could really relax on the trip instead of being bound up. And then also just packing for your medically fragile child. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. The first time you're going to freak out and feel like you're forgetting everything, and you might, but the more you do it, honestly, the first time I did it, it took me like days to prepare for a trip. And now I have it down to like, it still takes a while because it's a lot of stuff, but I can pack for Tate within a half a day, a few hours, something like that, because I've done it so much that it's almost become just second nature now. I do like to use plastic totes for a lot of his stuff instead of regular luggage. I like to do clear plastic totes. think about how your home is organized and organize your packing supplies really similarly. Part of the comfort of staying home is that you know where your things are at and you have them on hand. So just think about that whenever you're packing. So I keep a clear tote of respiratory supplies. I do a separate tote for enteral and feeding supplies. I do a separate tote for suction supplies. And that just keeps it kind of like I have it set up at home, where if I need something, I can just look at the clear plastic tote and know exactly where it is. And a couple of little things before I move on is, if you're traveling by car and you have to stop overnight and like stay at a hotel. So say like when we went to Florida, we stopped halfway. Pack a small bag with just one night's of supplies and like your clothes and all of that, so that you don't have to unload everything at stops along the way. If you're doing road trips, plan ahead to take breaks. The picture on the screen, you guys can see the Bass Pro Pyramid. That wasn't really a part of our vacation, but we knew that Tate would need to stop somewhere halfway. And so I just researched ahead of time, like halfway points between here and Florida. That was something that my husband had wanted to do for a long time. So we just made that part of the vacation. So instead of being bummed that you can't drive straight through like you used to before you had kids, just find things to stop. We also stopped at like a peach tree orchard where they made homemade ice cream. So just try to make it fun. Yeah, maybe you didn't want to stop, but try to find something that you've been wanting to do anyway.
I wanted to highlight too, is that a Wonderland wagon?
Yes. So for some of our traveling, when I know that I'm going to have lots of stuff to carry or be out all day, we do choose to bring our Wonderfold wagon instead of our wheelchair, just because I can pile a lot of stuff into it. Tate can lay down in it if he needs to. He has comfy seating. So it's been really great for trips that we go on. I
just plug in real quick that the patient assistant grant, Connor James Smith, that is definitely something that we'd look at if that makes things easier for your family. So
yes, I think that Krista mentioned that actually during her presentation, that was something. And I always like to bring 2 days extra of supplies. You never know if you are going to, something happens and you either end up in the hospital or at the urgent care and maybe you have to stay an extra night. Having 2 days worth of supplies is kind of my comfort. Anything that happens beyond 2 days, that 2-day cushion gives me time to figure out what's next. So even if you have to stay longer, if you have a 2-day cushion, you can figure out in those 48 hours, okay, what am I going to do next and make it happen?
Yeah.
Last thing is, if traveling, when I went to Florida, I actually joined local Florida Facebook groups of the town I was going to, like a travel page, and I posted about us coming, and I had several medical moms in that area actually reach out to me and say, hey, my kid has a feeding tube. If you need any feeding supplies while you're here, call us before going to the hospital. Someone offered to bring us a beach wagon. Someone offered to bring us a Peapod chair for the condo. And so really use social media to your advantage, because it kind of gave me a peace of mind knowing that I wasn't down there completely alone, that there was 2 other medical moms within like 20 minutes that were willing to help me out if needed.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I was going to move to your next slide here, Heather, so you can kind of talk a little bit about some of the equipment or point out what you have here that's made your life a little bit easier for Tate.
Yeah, so Tate has a lot of medical equipment. He also has a lot of stuff that we've, gotten through insurance, but I always like to find out of the box ideas too that aren't as expensive and something, maybe that works really well that insurance doesn't pay for or whatever. And so I wanted to make sure and include these 2 chairs. You see one to the left and one to the right. They are both actually from Sam's Club, and I think they're probably right around $30. Like, they're not expensive at all. Both of them have been really great for Tate. That one is like a hammock that he can lay in and swing. That's the adult size. They make a child size too, but I just kind of liked the bigger support the adult size gave. So that's like his camping chair. The blue one to the other side, it's like a lay down chair, but it has cushion support. So if your child doesn't, needs a break from his wheelchair or just needs a space to take naps or take breaks when you're out and about, or if you're at a day at the beach or whatever, that kept him off the ground out of the sand because of sensory issues and his trach. So that's been another really great chair for us to carry along with us. And then I often get asked about his flotation device, which is in the middle. It's Theraquatics, and it is a cerebral palsy square float. And so his body just sets down into it, and then it has a spot for each of his legs to go into. So like half of his body is in the water, and then I like it because with him, his trach is up out of the water, and I don't feel like it's getting too close. But it's just a very, very supportive float. They are a little expensive. I think they're somewhere around 200-ish. I can't remember for sure, but I did talk to Krista, and this is another thing that, the grant would be willing to pay for as well. And they come in lots of different sizes. Plus that website has lots and lots of options. So if this doesn't work for you, they have other options that probably would.
Awesome. You covered a lot of ground, Heather. Thank you so much. And keep the Q&A open if you guys have any questions or comments as we go through, and I'll make sure to pop those in. All right. So Madison, do you want to talk to us about traveling with Mia?
Hey, so I'm Madison, and Mia's my daughter. She's almost 6 now, but we've been traveling with her since she was born, even before we knew of her diagnosis. So I think that made the transition a little easier for us. Also, the fact that she's not super medically needy. We are more worried about keeping her busy and stuff like that. But as you see, we've gone, her first trip since being diagnosed was to Baltimore, and then we've gone to Georgia, Tennessee, the Carolinas, the Florida Keys a few times, and we went to Texas once. And we usually use car. She's flown on a plane twice. And the first plane trip went really well. I just brought lots of things to kind of keep her busy. And as you see in the picture here, she was eating puffs. She loves to eat those, and she'll eat a whole can. They don't really fill her up. They just keep her busy. So, and she was pretending to listen to things on my headphones. So that kind of kept her busy for a while. And our second flight, we went to Texas, and that was a little rougher. Maybe not want to fly with her again. We just prefer car just because if something goes wrong, or it's just, for me, I'd rather pack all my stuff in my car so I know where it's at and stuff like that.
And the Texas kind of went haywire because she ended up getting sick, and so
yeah,
a couple of extra added stressors.
Yeah, so we wound up flying to Texas and driving home early. We were supposed to be meeting up for the Cute Connections, but she got sick and she was throwing up, and I actually was sick before we left, and I thought I was better. And I had brought my sister with me. She wound up getting sick on the way home, and my family was sick. So sometimes, as Heather was saying, you could just stay and ride out the sickness. But in that particular moment, I thought it was best to get home safely. So we took 2 days to drive home. But with her, we plan, we try to have a good plan, but if it's not always going to work, sometimes she's having a rough day and doesn't want to do what we want to do. So, maybe my husband will go do something with Connor so he doesn't have to miss out, or we'll take turns. So that's nice, is kind of just to go with the flow. What I like to do is try to bring things she's used to from home. Her toys that she likes that may keep her busy in the car, or as I said, we prefer Airbnbs or larger hotel rooms. So she'll have time to decompress or play with her toys. She also has a specific blanket and her bunny, which you see in this other picture, that she's been taking everywhere with her. So we always remember that. And like I said, we kind of just go with the flow, do the best we can. I mean, I
Stella
don't
also
have,
has her favorite pillow and certain things like that that we're like, we have to bring back. So I totally understand that.
yeah, and it makes her more comfortable because she is more of a routine kiddo, you know, she doesn't like to be thrown too much out of a routine. For instance, when we did go to Texas, I didn't bring my husband or any of the other family. So for her, it was weird. She kept asking, when is daddy coming? And
Mhm.
it was kind of confusing for her. But normally we do go all as a family, and it does make it easier. Even sometimes, even when my husband and I will take the kids, we'll even ask my parents to go just to lighten the load a little bit.
Absolutely. It's a really good point that you bring up as far as keeping them on schedule. In Heather and I's case, and probably Milo's case too, is that, our schedule is based off of feeding, medication, breathing treatments, all those things. But when you have a child more like Mia and Emma, the schedule is probably more based off of like their routine and what they're used to doing at certain times of the day. So that's a great point.
I did want to mention, I forgot, the main thing I do try to, obviously her medical needs go as far as I make sure we have all her medicine, her rescues, and then extra. And I do try to know, you know, hospitals or doctors around we could go to if anything does happen. Kind of we kind of have the mindset is if something happens, we'll deal with it when it happens.
Yep, I totally agree. Yeah, and that's kind of what Heather said too. It's like it's either going to happen at home or it's going to happen
Mhm.
somewhere else. And so you deal with it the best you can. Absolutely. I love your last tip there too, staying in an Airbnb or hotel with a mini fridge. That I
Mhm.
made that mistake one time at not looking to see that they had a mini fridge. And I'm like, oh no. So yeah, that is on top priority of our list as well.
Yeah, it makes it nice for her too, because she likes certain like foods like applesauce or something. You may not, and it's just easier to keep it there.
Yeah, I'm going to move to your next slide so you can kind of, it looks like you guys have been on several adventures and she looks so
Mhm.
happy.
Yep. So this first one you see, we were in the Carolinas at one of our favorite breakfast spots we always go to when we go out there. We had actually met Karen and her family on that trip, and Sandy as well. And this lovely picture you see in the middle is from our Texas trip, actually. um, I was still very tired, and I was very glad to have my sister, who has a license and is comfortable driving, helping out. And you see our snacks and stuff in the background. Um, and below that was when she was younger, we went to the Keys. Actually, we had a little on the way to that trip, we almost didn't go. She had a come to find out if she was on the wrong medication, and she had toxic levels. But um, on the way there, we had stopped to get a snack, and her eyes were just going crazy, and she just wasn't really responding much. And we were trying to figure out, is she having a seizure or so we had called her doctor, and they told us just to bridge her medication. But we were kind of skeptical on that trip as well. But we my parents were with us, and we kind of just we were like, well, at least we're in Florida, so we'll
Yeah.
go and see what happens. And everything turned out okay. She was a little extra tired, but oh well, I get tired too. So and this last one was also from the same trip. Recently we had it's not very much snow, but we were trying to get them to see snow. And surprisingly, Mia really liked it. We didn't know if she would like the cold, but she liked wearing her hat and all her layers and playing in the snow. So it was a good time.
I love that. I love all the experiences that you guys have provided your kiddos. I love it. All right. Anything else that you can think of, Madison?
Um,
Yeah, you'll think of like 20 different things once we move
Once I
on.
hear someone say something, I'll think of something else. But right now, no.
No problem. Well, always you can shoot it in the Q&A as we move forward. All right, Gail, let's hear about your adventures with Mr. Milo.
Yes, yes. So my name is Gail Muller-Grevin, and our SCN8A child is Milo. So he doesn't have a trach, but he's also quite severely disabled. He is wheelchair bound and G-tube fed, nonverbal. So the thought of taking a trip really did petrify us. We did fly with him when he was 6 months old, and he had already been having seizures, but he was still kind of newborn enough that he didn't yet have a wheelchair or a lot of other equipment. So it was a little bit easier to bring him on a plane. He did fine on the plane, but he did have a seizure when we first got to Florida. We went both times that we've traveled by plane with him, we went to Florida. And we went to the ER and right away just had them reach out to his neurologist, whoever was on staff. And they actually just went off whatever his neurologist recommended, which was really nice. I think they're not used to kids in Naples, Florida. I think they're mostly geriatric patients.
They're probably very happy that you had a direct contact to call.
Yes. So we then didn't try, and then the rest of the trip went fine. The time we were visiting my parents, they had gotten a condo. So we didn't travel for a little while. I was pregnant with his sister, and just a lot was happening. He had his cardiac arrest, which then caused a lot of the more severe disabilities he has now. And after just seeing pictures on Facebook from the support group of all the different people going to the beach, I thought, well, why can't we go to the beach? We'll figure it out. Especially because we have my parents who go to their condos. So we already have kind of like a second home we can take advantage of, which makes it a lot easier. It's not impossible to go to, I do think Airbnb is definitely better than a hotel if you can do that. But it can be more quiet and you just have to make sure it's wheelchair accessible. We had actually used an Airbnb, even though my parents have the condo, they're on the second floor. So because of Milo and his sister Maya's nap times and things, and well, Maya can cry, but Milo can definitely cry sometimes because of the meds and whatnot. So we just didn't want to disturb like the entire, place that my parents were at. So we stayed nearby at a separate Airbnb, but the host definitely was able to tell us that it was wheelchair accessible. We just had to get over a door threshold, etc. So Airbnb, I saw, was already mentioned before. Definitely a good tip. So another nice thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is if you can try to ship supplies to your destination if you're flying. That definitely eases up how much you have to bring with you the day of traveling. We only brought with us about 2 to 3 days worth of feeding bags and formula just in case we got stuck somewhere for whatever reason. And we didn't have to ship the other supplies. We got lucky. My parents were driving down ahead of time, so we just gave them like 2 boxes of stuff to bring down in advance, including his splashy chair. So it just made life a lot easier for sure. So that brings me to tip number 2, which is coordinate with others who may be traveling with you, or try to convince them. If you were just going to do a family trip, see if you can get the grandparents to come, or an aunt and uncle or whatever. So we thankfully we had my parents, and then my brother actually flew with us. So that was an extra set of hands to help carry equipment. And on the way back, we had my brother again and his wife. So we had plenty of hands, which really helped out a lot with all of the equipment. Another important thing is, especially for flying, bring any relevant documents. Medical history. That way, especially if you're at a smaller clinic, they might be overwhelmed with your child's case and situation. Just having that medical history really helps out. And of course, bring medications. That's important. And that we had to just take with us the day of. We didn't, like my parents didn't bring meds ahead of time. And for relevant documents, I do want to specify that it may be helpful if you have a letter from your doctor, essentially saying that your child is clear to fly. So if there are any issues, you shouldn't have any problems with the airlines. Also, just with the airlines and with the airport, that letter can include the supplies that they need, so that you won't have any trouble with bringing medical equipment on board if it's written in the medical statement. So overall, with a little extra planning, Heather mentioned that it gets easier each time. I sure hope so, because it took me days to plan it too. I'm pretty sure I started making the packing list weeks in advance. But yeah, it's hard because some things you can't really pack until the day of, because they're using it. It's not written on here, but a few other small things. is that sometimes you can either opt out of taking certain equipment or you can find alternatives. So for example, Milo normally gets a nebulizer treatment just of saline, but with a vest compression as well. Chest vest compression, airway clearance system. Anyway, that machine is huge for us anyway. That's one of the bigger pieces of Milo's equipment. So we decided to simply not take it with us. It was just such a, like its own suitcase essentially. So instead we used those little manual cupping,
Mhm.
I don't know what you'd
Yeah.
call it.
Yep, we
And
have those too.
yeah, so, my husband volunteered to cup manually Milo for like 15 minutes every evening. And then Milo would just get his nebulizer treatment. That's the one medical equipment we did bring, nebulizer while he was feeding. We brought Milo's wheelchair, if you want to go to the next slide. And we were able to get a wheelchair bag that fits, and my sister-in-law actually, you can see it just a little bit on the bottom of that picture there with the wheelchair, some padding, some sort of like honeycomb padding, so that way if the airline people kind of tossed it around, it would be safe. And we figured out, it took a few tries, it was like Tetris. We figured out how to disassemble his wheelchair so that everything fit in the bag, which was really convenient. So we actually used the wheelchair to get around the airport, as you can see in that middle top picture. His sister actually used his car seat during that was essentially her stroller, and we had a cart, like a little dolly that his car seat sat on. So he used his wheelchair, she used his car seat on a dolly, and then her newborn car seat is strapped to the carry-on bag, as you can see. That carry-on bag was the medical bag. Medical bags are free, and I'd recommend that you keep it as a carry-on so you have access to everything. You may be asked to show the contents, because when we showed up, we used Frontier. They were good overall, but the lady threatened us. She said, if there's even one sock that's not medical, it's not counting. So we opened it, and we did have some like kind of not really medical looking things, but I think she saw that clearly it was packed with all the medical stuff, so they didn't give us any trouble. I think they're worried about, you packing an entire suitcase and putting like a little glucose monitor in the corner and calling it medical. And we used the car seat obviously for Milo flying. We had a cart for the beach, although it like did not turn at all in the sand. And we used the splash heaper on the beach as well. And we have this really neat feeding pump holder from and I forgot his name. Who's
Yes.
the
Is it Flying Squirrel or something like that?
no, it's from a member of our group.
Oh, that has made.
Mia, I think it's Mia who just got her service dog, her dad.
Okay, that's great. We'll have to ask
We can
them.
post the link. It's on Etsy. Yeah. So
Cool.
that was really nice. We hung it very easily in the plane and everything. So yeah, it was super handy.
And just it warms my heart to see him getting his feed on the beach.
I know. Yeah, see,
if
we
I
kept
could-
the routine.
Philip Cook is what Karen said. Philip Cook
Yes,
is.
thank you. I did want to add a quick.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mia or Madison.
I was just gonna say, listening to Gail, she actually going through her airport setup. I was gonna mention, if possible, what we did with Mia is I used her stroller to push through the airport, and I put her in a baby carrier or a toddler carrier because she was bigger by then. If your child's able to do that, that also is helpful. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, you're fine.
Glad you jumped in.
I lost my train of thought. I'll come back, but yeah, it'll come back.
That's okay. I was going to jump into that. Karen mentioned that there are also some companies that work with travel agencies that will provide oxygen or oxygen concentrators, and they'll actually deliver it to your hotel room or ship if you're on a cruise or a condo or something. So that is amazing. I did not know about that. So that is great to know, because I've always wondered that, like, gosh, what would we do if Stella needed oxygen? So it's a great one.
I had a quick thing. I tried to put it in the chat and I can't really figure out how to do it.
Yeah, only the Q&A is working for whatever reason.
But whenever she mentioned like medical documents and stuff, I've posted it in the SCN8A group before, but I just recently found a really, really great website app called Mijo. It's made by a caregiver, My Medical Journal, and it is the most robust like technology like app for caregivers that I've seen. And Tate has a lot of stuff, and it basically had a spot for me to put everything. And it's just a fillable document. You can put in medical histories, medication, equipment, diagnosis, like just all of the things that we need to know. Where we have Citizen, but it's very much, I feel like it is geared towards like what our doctors need. The Mijo is just definitely for caregivers. So it's digital. You can have a copy on your phone to travel with, or you can also print out like a PDF. And so I think that like I'll definitely be traveling with that from here on out.
Cool.
I remember.
Great.
I just a last note about routine. Milo, although we definitely have the routine of medications and feeds and such, and we also have the nap time routine, not just him, but his sister. So what we did is we actually tried to get plane tickets around that, which thankfully we had the opportunity to do that. It only was, like $50 more, but it helps a lot. Yeah, just knowing that we're not going to be trying to deal with Milo, screaming, trying to fall asleep on the plane.
Right. And I feel like, we're kind of having to rush through today, but I think that you were just such a wealth of knowledge with flying with kiddos like Milo. And so I would highly encourage anyone that if they have questions, if you don't mind, for them to reach out to you, because I think you had so many amazing tricks and tips. And I never would have thought about the wheelchair, breaking it down like that and the padding and all of those things. So such a great tips for us.
I'm always happy to share anything. And, I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff now that if someone were to ask, I would remember. And I know we have our special guest who'll explain more about TSA Cares, but we did reach out to them in advance, and that was helpful. You're supposed to mention it when you go to security. And we kind of sometimes, so the security person didn't really know, but ultimately, as soon as they saw Milo, they just helped us right away. So it's really not it's really not that much work. You should just do it. If you want to go travel, just do it. Stop finding excuses. Because Milo loved to go and experience the beach and the sand in his feet and the water and all of that. And he actually loved flying more than his sister. His sister was just probably like Mia, trying to be occupied, because constraining a toddler is very difficult. Milo was just smiling the whole time.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So exciting. And I love all your pictures. Well, if you think of anything else, drop it in the Q&A, and we can either, people can see the Q&A too, or I can bring it up when we're chatting. Thank you so much. All right. So now we're going to talk to Colleen. Now I've got to figure out how to get Colleen on here. So hold on one second. I'm going to bring up allow to talk. So I think Colleen, are you able to jump on?
Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, it works.
Okay. So you can't see me, but you can hear me. So that's half the battle.
That works.
I think that like what everybody's already touched on, pretty much the big stuff. And I think that what it comes down to, like the bottom line is that your kids, if they're having a lot of medical issues, when they're not having the medical issues, if you're not doing anything with them, it's sort of like a punishment that they start to feel like it's more who they are than what they have. Because then they're not able to enjoy the time. It's like you're letting the SCN8A steal the joy when it should be their time to enjoy life. And if you're frozen with fear, which is easy to do, it's they feel it increases their anxiety and depression. And like for Emma, her whole thing is like she wants to, in her words, feel normal. So when she can't do all of those other things, it reinforces the fact that she has this. So the more we do with her and the more she experiences, the less it defines who she is.
I love that.
She also did something once. How old was she? I think it was just Emma, Jake, and I went to Six Flags, and Emma wanted to ride the teacups. So Jake and I stood there, and this was like in between years where Emma was spent much of the time in the hospital. So Jake and I were waiting for her to come around the corner, and Jake said, "Where did she go?" And the worst fear, she was gone. She had disappeared, and I just stood in the middle of the park crying, and one of the employees came over and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm not okay. I'm not at all okay." I said, "She's gone." I said, She's got medical issues." I said, like, I don't know where she went, and she could be seizing. Maybe somebody stole her, because she's vulnerable, and she would be more than willing to go off with somebody." So lo and behold, what Emma did was and this goes back to what I was saying about letting them experience the typical things. She was decided that she wanted to have some independence. And so she walked over to one of the biggest roller coasters in the park and rode it alone.
Oh my gosh.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
what
So,
did she she was having the time of her life, wasn't she though?
she totally was. And like I literally couldn't breathe for probably 15 minutes, and I couldn't leave the spot I was in case she came back. And it
Yes.
was Jake and I. Jake was probably only 12. I didn't want to send him off on his own and then lose both kids.
Right.
And then when Jake spotted her and he went up to her, she was all defiant, and she was like, "I want my independence just like everybody else does." So it sort of opened my eyes that some of the times where I would protect her from, experiencing some major event somewhere, um she it's just what she needed, was to be able to go off and do the things that other people are doing. Still terrified, like if she goes on a roller coaster, that what if something happens during that ride?
Sure.
But I can't take that away from her. And it's the same with traveling. One of the tips I would give is, because we've had it happen 3 times, where we needed to call an ambulance from a hotel. Know how to get an outside line when you get into a hotel room, because they're not all just the same, where you dial 911, and sometimes the front desk will call for you, sometimes they won't. So that goes into the planning too, where you have your hospitals. We often let our doctor know when we're traveling and where we're traveling. We have, like it was mentioned, we have all of her documents. I have a rescue kit, and because we have guardianship, I have that, because otherwise, especially during the pandemic, you weren't allowed in the hospital. And there was one time where we were on vacation, just she and I, and she ended up intubated with an IO and a femline, and it was really not a very pleasant vacation. But they almost didn't let me stay with her. And it was that was probably my biggest panic, was that I couldn't be with her. So to have all of the documentation is absolutely key. And make sure that you have a seizure action plan, and that you can reach your doctor and make sure that they're aware, and have extra meds. Always have extra meds, because even the outside hospitals local to us, like if Emma were to have a medical emergency at home, we don't go to our children's hospital because it's too far away. They bring us to a different hospital, and they don't necessarily have all the medications that she takes. So I always have extra stuff. The handicap placard, if you fly somewhere and you bring it with you, make sure you take it back out of the rental car.
Good
Bring it
point.
home. We had them chase us once.
Oh gosh.
Yes, thank God they did. Thank God that they noticed it before we were gone from the rental area. So, and the trip insurance is just, it's peace of mind, because then if you need to change it, and sometimes that happens even if you have like a typical family, like things happen. So, but with us, we know that it's, the likelihood is greater. So we get the trip insurance so that it's not canceled, it can be rescheduled.
Mhm.
And, you know, let them enjoy the time where they do feel well enough to be out and about.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to your next slide just so we can go through these pictures. I know one of your last tips was making sure that you plan rest time. So we can see Emma enjoying her rest time here in these slides.
Yeah, and sometimes the rest time is not planned.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have plans, like you try to work it so that you're maximizing the time where she does feel up for going out and doing things. And then there's times where you have something planned and she's just too tired. So, you have to, somebody else mentioned it, you have to sort of roll with it and make the best of the situation and find something, read a book, if you're stuck sitting there, and you can't get out somewhere, get a book, take a nap yourself.
Mhm. Love it. And I just have to commend you. You do so many fun things with Emma, and seeing your guys' trips to the theater and concerts and all kinds of fun things. You can just tell she's having the time of her life.
She is, and lucky for me, I get to tag along with her.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. All right, Colleen, if you can think of anything else, make sure you drop it in the Q&A section, and we'll bring it up. Or, once I post this recording too, we'll have some links and stuff for people to be able to chat back and forth.
Yeah, so just let your kids have fun so that they don't take off in Six Flags alone.
Oh gosh. Or have like a troop of 12 people to like be like bystanders where she doesn't realize they're watching. So funny. Awesome. Well, before I move on to my travel with Stella, I wanted to mention Chinzia posted in the Q&A about they went to a Greek island last summer by ferry boat. That's a great idea. It was 20 hours, but they were able to bring their car with them, and they stayed almost a month. That sounds glorious.
Oh,
Yeah. So it sounds like, she said it was very, very risky because they're Greek hospitals, but she said it was just so wonderful to be able to have that time as a family. So I just love that. I'm glad that you shared that with us. So I will very quickly, because I know we want to have time for our TSA Cares wrap, and I guarantee we're going to go over. So if you need to jump off at some point in time, that's totally fine. But I do want to make sure that we have time and since this is recorded and we have her on hand. But really quickly, like I said, I saw Krista and her husband Sean traveling with Connor, and I said, I think we can do that with Stella. And so our very first big trip was to Fort Morgan, Alabama, and we took 2 cars. So I traveled with one of our student nurses with us, and with Lincoln and Stella, and all the stuff, main stuff Stella needed, but all the extra stuff, my husband came in a separate car with all of that. And then my parents and my sister and her family met us there, and we got this huge Airbnb house that we divided between all 3 of us. And that was so lovely to be able to have all that space. And you can see in that bottom left-hand picture, that's her in her Firefly splashy chair, enjoying the water. And it was just glorious. She loved it. And then our second big trip was last summer. We went to San Antonio, Texas, to the Morgan's Wonderland theme park and water park. And I cannot say enough good things about that place. It was absolutely magical. I get tear up every time I think about it, because Stella knew that we were doing that for her. Like, I can tell you, she was on from the time we got her into the van to the time that we got home. She knew that this was all about her. And you can see that picture right here of her, that's in the Ferris wheel where we got to roll her in, and she just like loved it. And then the water park was right up her alley. They have waterproof wheelchairs that they fit your child in, and they have all kinds of positioning devices. It was just absolutely amazing. And then we do day trips. We'll go to our local lake, which is about a 45-minute drive for us, 30 to 45 minutes. And we get Stella her life jacket and we get her on the pontoon boat, and she loves having the air go through her face and her hair. Oh, she just loves it. So we try to do that at least once or twice a year. So my big tips and tricks are, if you can, bring an extra caregiver with you. We hire nursing students to help us a lot. And so it just allows us to get some overnight sleep. So they will be on for overnight and then take naps during the day. So then they can help us out, mainly an overnight for us. But, again, it's up to your family's needs. I always let our neurologist know that we're traveling. And so I'll give her a message and say, hey, we're leaving this day, we're traveling here, and we're coming back this day. So they know in case there's an emergency, they can be on. And then we also scope out local hospitals, even along the way. So if we need to stop somewhere, we can. And like Gail said, to consolidate equipment as much as you can. There were certain pieces of equipment that we didn't take with us, because in our eyes was like, if we need this, it's most likely an emergency and she needs to be hospitalized anyway. So there were certain things that we didn't bring. Some of the, you can see some of our pictures here, the top one to the left. This was actually during COVID. And so one of the reasons why we took 2 vehicles was so I could have an area where we could feed Stella and change her diaper and all that without having to go into anywhere else. The only places we took her out was the hotel and our Airbnb. So we didn't get her out anywhere else because of COVID. And then you can see the middle picture there of the van. I was very strategic in how I packed it. My husband was not allowed to touch it. He is a great hauler of all things, but I wanted to make sure I knew where everything was. I really like Heather's idea of clear totes. So that's something I might have to adopt. But yeah, I made sure that I knew where everything was and I could get to it if I needed it. And then we rented a wheelchair accessible van because we don't have one of those yet. And Stella absolutely loved it. And there was plenty of room for her brother, Lincoln, and our caregiver in the back. Another tip is food. And so we found ourselves where we had a little cooler with Stella's food. And then when we needed to warm it up, some of the gas stations didn't have a microwave. And so I would put her food up in the console or the front dash of the car, and it would warm it up. Sometimes you can even put it between your thighs, and that will also warm up food if you need it. And then that's just Stella napping when we were on our beach trip. We had one of those big wedge pillows that we got and brought that with her. And that definitely helped make her a little bit more comfortable. So again, like everyone else, we highly encourage you to take the trip and to make those memories with your family. It is nerve-wracking, but it was totally worth it in every case that we've taken Stella. Okay, again, I know we're running close on time, but I am going to bring on Marie Trottier, and she is our TSA Cares representative. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and that way you can bring up your slides if you need to. Marie.
Well, and actually I can't because I'm on my personal laptop.
Oh, shoot. Okay, I didn't think about that. Okay,
No,
that's right.
I didn't either because, again, for everyone here, we are not allowed to have Zoom. So I didn't realize that because I do attend Zoom meetings all the time, but this is the first time I've had to sign in. So in that situation, thank God I'm working from home today. So I'm on my personal laptop. But we'll go through. And so again, I just want to say that I'm actually in the Civil Rights Office. I'm not a TSA Cares representative. I want to just clarify that really carefully, is that I am the Outreach and Engagement Program Manager in the Civil Rights Office. I'm a senior policy advisor. And so A big part of my role is engaging with organizations around the country on different disabilities and medical conditions. If you can see me, you can identify that I have a disability, physical disability of achondroplasia and dwarfism. And I just have to step out of my professional role and go into my personal for just a second, because of the fact that my husband was a functional quadriplegic on a ventilator for more than 20 years. So all the things that you do with your children in terms of packing and planning, with your driving, planes, trains, automobiles, I did with my husband. And again, while there are many things my husband could do for himself, because of the fact that he was a man, I had to make sure everything was packed and shipped and everything else. And we don't need to go into that into any more detail. But I completely understand the checklist and shipping things ahead, and doing all the research and asking all the questions in that same way. So I appreciated being on time and listening to all of you, because I can so identify with all of that, and the things that happen through that. So again, TSA does fall under Section 504. We have all of our programs are accessible to individuals with disabilities. Should you choose to fly or need to fly for medical care or for personal trips, then TSA Cares, which has the passenger support specialist, is available to everyone. And so it's a toll-free helpline. It is open 7 days a week, mostly, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And Casey, I will send you slides after the fact so that you can send them out to your cohort in that situation. And so they coordinate assistance through the checkpoint. So you're going to either be on the phone or on email with a representative sharing the information that people need to know. And this is for TSA to get you through the checkpoint. And again, as we all know, as we have been caregivers and family members and everything else, you need to work with the airline also in terms of their requirements in that situation, which all of you are very adept at with all that you're sharing. And so again, these officers are TSA officers who receive extra training and actually certification to become passenger support specialists. So they have much more training in individuals with disabilities and medical conditions. They're not subject matter experts. They are not medical providers, but they're able to understand so much more to help with regard to medical equipment, with regard to medications, that kind of thing. A couple of other hints I just want to share with all of you from what you've been sharing. If you are flying, if there are things that you can pack in checked luggage in that such situation, I recommend it, because when it comes to like liquids, gels, and aerosols or other things, sometimes the officers do have discretion of how much they'll let you travel with. So if there are things that are not needing to be climate controlled or other types of situations, otherwise I would say contact TSA Cares in advance, as well as your airline, to make sure that you can carry the amounts that you need for the trip. And I harp on this and I advise leadership all the time that, again, when my husband and I would be traveling, let's say to, a remote location on the coast of Maine, where there is no healthcare provider for 3+ hours of driving, in that situation, we needed to have everything for the full 2 to 3 weeks that we were going to be there. Like the individual who traveled to Greece for a month, what you need for your family members. So in that situation, advocate and get the approvals from TSA and from the airline, certainly. And again, if you can call or email at least 72 hours in advance, that's best in order to assure, and you should receive confirmation. And then when you arrive at the checkpoint, they should have the information. And again, from some of you who have shared that the PSS has not been there, I ask you in future travel to please file a civil rights complaint on tsa.gov. And if you put in civil rights complaint, because we need to know about those things as the civil rights office for the entire agency, and TSA is currently screening 2.5 million travelers a day, whether you're traveling for medical appointments, you're traveling personally, or for family reunions, or, anniversaries of grandparents or whatever, it's all incredibly important. And given the stress that you all go through and have to deal with your children, with your families, which I've lived and I understand, then we want to take that burden off of you as much as possible. And so again, in that way, I mean, those are the basics of what we have to offer. It is 24/7. And, even if you have last minute travel, then please call, explain to them, like, I just found out today that we have to fly out on Friday. Can you please do this because my child has significant, medical needs in that way. So I'll open it up to any questions or comments because I know we're running out of time this afternoon.
That's no problem. And so, I think I was kind of going through some of the questions that we had when I asked the group a couple weeks ago, and it kind of sounds like maybe they would contact, like when they got to the airport, instead of for the TSA cares person that was going to help them, they were going up to the airline, and then the airline didn't know what they were talking about. So
Right.
can you remind us again? So if you have someone through TSA cares, where do you need to go in order to get them at the airport?
Okay, thank you. And that's a perfect question. Thank you. And so again, you're going to the TSA checkpoint. So you're literally right. And again, that's a situation. The airline's not going to know what you're talking about. And again, we don't cross communicate at the airport. So the airport authority manages the real estate. Each airline manages their own, and TSA is the federal agency on site, and also Customs and Border Protection if it's an international airport. But you need to go to the TSA checkpoint and then say, in that situation, I'm Casey Craig. I'm traveling with my husband and my children. I requested a PSS, travel passenger support specialist, and I was told that, to ask here in that situation. And whatever information you would give it. If you receive an email, print it out. If you receive, and again, if you receive a name and a phone number, call that cell phone number. So in that situation, there are many times you may receive, Marie Trottier, 202-689-9770 is her TSA iPhone. Give her a call, when you're arriving at the airport to make sure she can meet you in that regard. So yes, please go to TSA if you've requested a PSS, something specific to get through airport security.
Great. And so essentially they can kind of help you go through the security part, kind of help ease the burden of putting all the things, they can kind of help walk you through that. And then will they get you all the way up to the, kind of like the airport hub where you're going to fly out of? Like your specific airline, how far do they go, I guess?
No, they're really only the TSA checkpoint. So hopefully if you've got a wheelchair attendant or those extra family members, those extra caregivers with you in terms of that piece. But again, yes, I mean, they'll make sure you're in the wheelchair accessible lane, and larger lane in terms of additional equipment. I mean, you should always get brought to the front of the line because you're going to come in a separate entrance to not be in those huge queues that will be coming up this summer as we go through. Memorial Day and summer heavy travel, but then they're just going to get you to what we call the sterile area beyond the TSA checkpoint when you're now in the terminal beyond TSA and you've cleared through security.
Okay, so it's mainly just to kind of help us get through that stressful security checkpoint, and probably it maybe help even, like with all of our crazy bags and all the medication and stuff, they can at least kind of help it, or at least explain, or the TSA security officers will be like, okay, yes, they're needing extra help, and this is why they have all the extra stuff.
No, exactly right. And they're going to give you that extra time, and they're going to basically for me, I call them, they're going to be Moses and part those waters. They're going to part those waters so that therefore all the medical equipment, supplies, feedings, everything, and your family are getting through to all be together, to travel together.
Cool. And if we had family members that had questions about like what's the kind of official things they can bring for medical equipment, liquid medicine, formula and stuff, where exactly should they go in order to find out that information?
Okay, they should be going to tsa.gov. tsa.gov. And again, we're in the process of a multi-month project right now of updating all of these things to add more information from civil rights complaints we've gotten and from my outreach and engagement with all of the organizations. So, and again, the same thing in terms of feedback. And I would just say to you, Casey, since we now have a professional working relationship, if families are giving you feedback or whatever, or even ask aheads before travel, you certainly can get them to me. The other thing you can do as well is you can call TSA Cares with questions. You can call, you may not be traveling until 4th of July week or something. You may not be going to, Disney World until September, but you may want to just call ahead and ask questions for assistance. And again, the same thing, I think if you don't get the answers that you need or want in that piece, check with TSA.gov, because we're really trying to have drop downs and like accordion drop downs where you can get the information there, or to call that line. And also you, Casey, can feed me information directly and I'll get you the answers and get back to you.
Great, great. Wow. I mean, this is just so nice to be able to have someone like you in our back pocket where we can, reach out to you and get more specific feedback, and then also be that conduit of, questions or concerns or things that didn't go well. So I agree.
Absolutely. No, and again, I think that's the thing too, is, I mean, we're screening 2.5 million people a day at 450 airports. Things go wrong, life happens,
Sure.
as well as then there are security breaches, or there are, other things happening at airports, unfortunately, that we see in our news every day, and all around us. So I think in that situation, but also, the more I learn from you, I mean, in a situation there, I've learned so much just becoming, affiliated with you, and I've just taken so much in today, but this is one snapshot of experience. But I think in that situation too, the more we learn from you and from your families, all of you in that situation, the better we can be. Because if there's something we need to do, if we create a job aid or create something called a national shift brief that goes out to our entire workforce, I mean, those are things that we do specific to individual disabilities and medical conditions. When a situation went bad, even at one airport, we share that then with all of the airports to say learning experience for all of us in our agency.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. Wow. All right. Well, we had a lot of information to cover today. And so I appreciate you sharing those slides with me later, and I will make sure that that gets out to our families. That way they have that direct contact of the phone number and everything else that they can call. And we'll make sure that that information gets out to everyone.
Right.
Well, I know that our list has dwindled here as we've kind of gotten over time here, but I appreciate you guys all coming today. Gail, Madison, Colleen, Heather, all of you coming on and sharing your stories. And I also want to throw out that we appreciate our sponsorships from Neurocrine Biosciences and Praxis Precision Medicine, so we can put on this series every year. This is our final Meaningful Change series for this go around, but we will be back at it next year. Gail, can you think of anything else as we close for today?
Yeah, I just want to add that, with TSA, it really went really smooth, and that, they still are very thorough and they'll check everything. And they did have to open one of Milo's formulas. They asked if it was okay because they weren't able to check the bottle through their other methods. So just like a heads up that, they might have to do something like that. They ask, they're very polite. But they are checking for, and obviously security things, so they do have to be thorough. But they, when you have medications, for example, you don't have to be confined to the normal fluid rules. So they are understanding that it's something that you need, and so you have those exceptions, but they're still thorough about everything you bring.
Right, exactly.
Just
We're trying to keep planes from coming down out of the sky.
exactly.
In that situation, we have to screen, right? We have to screen everything. So I appreciate that it was a good experience. And again, that whole situation of respect of they asked first, but if they can't clear it by the means that they're using, absolutely. In that situation, but again, if there is a bumpy ride with TSA, because there are 60,000 officers, and where turnover is high, hopefully not as much after July of this year, now that they're finally getting pay equity compared to other agencies, because they do have some of the hardest jobs out there. But Gael, I'm really happy to hear that, that experience in that situation. But I also want to know the flip side. I want to know the flip side. If there are situations, I want to know the specific airport, time of day, the flight information, whatever, because of the fact that we need to do better in certain places. And so therefore we want to know. But I'm glad you had that experience. And Colleen, one thing I just have to share with you is, I'm a much older woman now, but I was just like Emma when I was younger, in terms of that level of independence as someone with a disability in that situation. So, I mean, I was at big theme parks and other places on school groups where I decided to go off on my own and ride the biggest roller coaster. And I had school principals and chaperones, type of thing, trying to figure out like, oh my God, where did we lose her? Where is she now? And for me, it was just one of those things of exerting my independence and saying, I can do it on my own. I may be small in size, but I can do it on my own.
I love that. That's a great example. Our,
No,
I have more.
I was laughing off camera because I was like, when Colleen shared that, I'm like, yes, yes, my kindred spirit.
yes, exactly.
3 generations later.
I did have one more general comment. A lot of parents may be scared of, and this was one of the things we thought about, the what if. What if something really terrible happens? Like in a plane, you can't just pull over and like deal with a massive seizure. And sure, that could happen, but most days it doesn't happen. And we took the risk. Like it is a risk. I'm not going to lie. Something could have happened very terribly, but we think that taking that risk so that Milo can enjoy his time, because he probably will, it's worth it, and that's actually the same way we feel about school. We know he might get sick, but we want him to just be a kid, and he loves school. He's engaged for the same reasons. So yeah, you can't coop them up.
No,
No matter the disability,
no, that's right. And I'll share a similar story with my husband from a standpoint of, because he was on a ventilator. We got caught in a horrible rainstorm at an outdoor concert, and literally the ventilator stopped working. So thankfully we had friends with us and we had a wheelchair accessible van, but one of our friends had to ambu bag him all the way back home. And it was a situation. I was on the phone. I was driving and on the cell phone with his doctor, but they were basically saying, just get back home. You've got a second ventilator at home. If you can drive home, get back home, since you've got somebody to do that. But it was that whole thing, exactly, Gael, of quality of life, and and him wanting to live the most normal life possible. That it's one of those things that, thank God, there was no tragedy. Thank God, whatever. And so we just had many stories and many laughs. And for us, opening a bottle of wine that night when we finally got home and back in that situation, because of the fact that you have to live. Yeah. So I know, I appreciate that very much.
And I think if you're sitting at home going, gosh, this just blows my mind and I can't get there yet, that's okay. Start with day trips. Start with going to the zoo. Start with going to a museum or an aquarium, then venture out maybe an hour away and doing a day trip, or, staying even an hour or two away in a hotel or an Airbnb or something like that. So you can absolutely start small and work your way up until you feel a little bit more confident.
Or even if you just doing the day trips and doing small, right?
Yeah.
Also mentioning like the cute connections that are coming up. I mean, we have several different cute connections all across America, and I think there's international ones as well. So if you're, where you feel like you could do that, that's a really good place to start, because you're going to be with other families who get it. So you won't be alone. You won't be in a strange place by yourself. You're going to be with someone who also deals with seizures, who also deals with XYZ, and maybe knows the area. So if you haven't traveled before, maybe one of the cute connections is a good place to start.
Absolutely.
Heather, that's a beautiful picture of you and your son.
Isn't it?
Thank you so much. Your ventilator stories are making me laugh, because I'm like, yep, we there.
No, and I appreciated all of you today. I'm like, oh my goodness, can I relate to all of this? I didn't know in terms of but in terms of sense of community, so many things that we've gone through that, similar, and those kinds of things. And you're right. I mean, cute connections, anything that is sense of community, that you feel comfortable because it's people understand. I mean, people, it's the first time that, I went to an LPA meeting, and now I'm the international liaison on an international basis for LPA. And so that's the thing, is having grown up as someone with a disability, and now I sit on boards of directors of disability organizations, because I get it, and I've lived it, and I face the discrimination, and I face the people taking videos of me and photos of me in everyday situations, chasing me down after coming out of a concert or a sports event. And we have the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you just have to savor the good and just capitalize, and especially with community with similar experiences. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, Heather, I'm so glad that you mentioned the cute connection. So if you right now we have one organizing in Italy, and then we have one in Atlanta, Georgia, and then we're still trying to get our Branson, Missouri one off the ground. And then it sounds like there was some talk about one in possibly Chicago, and then there's Columbus, Ohio, but it didn't sound like Michelle got a whole lot of interest quite yet. But if that's something you're interested in, I think Michelle hasn't completely deserted that. So those are all areas. But if you have one closer to home that you want to host, we would be very much open to that. So just fill out your Cute Connections grants application and we can get one started for you. Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing all of your tips and tricks and sharing your family vacations with us. I know we went over. I literally think we could sit here and talk for hours and hours. But so we'll start here, and that will start the conversations, and we can have more conversations on our support group via Facebook or chats there as well. All right, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Marie, thank you so much for coming on today, and we'll make sure to share all of your amazing information with our families.
No, thank you all. I've enjoyed it very much. Take care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thank you.